The sun was just beginning to dip behind the skyline, casting a soft, golden glow across my apartment. I straightened the silk blouse I was wearing, smoothing out a wrinkle that wasn't really there, and took a slow sip of my coffee. The city hummed below, traffic moving like rivers of light. On the surface, everything looked perfect. My high-rise office reflected in the window, my carefully curated artwork behind me, my life meticulously assembled. Yet, beneath it all, there was a quiet tension I couldn't shake. My phone buzzed against the marble countertop. I glanced at it, heart skipping a beat. Their names, Mom and Dad, stared back at me from the screen. I hadn't expected them to reach out, not after all these years. Not after the night I had walked out of that house, suitcase in hand, with nothing but the clothes on my back and the echo of slammed doors ringing in my ears. I felt the familiar pang. Hurt, yes, but also something sharper, pride. I had survived. I had built a life that was mine, every achievement hard-earned. And yet, there was irony in seeing their names now like ghosts from a past I had tried so hard to leave behind. I stared out at the skyline, my fingers brushing over the smooth surface of the phone. Should I answer? Or let it ring until they understood, without me saying a word, that I had changed, that I had won? I was 16 when it all fell apart. The argument started over something small, grades, I think, or maybe the way I spent my weekends, but it quickly escalated into a storm I couldn't weather. My parents' voices were sharp, slicing through the tiny kitchen of our cramped house. I remember the sting of their words, each one a knife I couldn't dodge. "You'll never amount to anything," Mom had said, her eyes burning with frustration. Dad shook his head, silent at first, then finally spoke, cold as ice. "Maybe it's better if you leave." I froze. The words hung in the air like smoke, and I felt a strange combination of fear and disbelief. My hands trembled as I clutched the straps of my backpack, the same one I had worn to school every day, now heavy with more than just books. The lump in my throat was unbearable. I wanted to shout, to cry, to beg them to reconsider, but nothing came out. I walked out that night carrying only the essentials and a small, worn journal my grandmother had given me. "Write your truth, my darling," she had said, pressing it into my hands. "No one else can tell it for you." That journal became my talisman, my secret lifeline in the months to come. It reminded me that I wasn't alone, even when I felt completely abandoned. The streets were cold as I wandered, each step echoing the uncertainty of my future. I stayed with friends, small apartments, couches, anywhere I could find a safe corner. Every night, I would open that journal, pen in hand, spilling out everything: anger, grief, hope, and the tiny sparks of ambition that refused to die. By the end of that week, I made a decision I would never regret. I wasn't going to wait for anyone to believe in me. I would forge my own path, no matter how uncertain, no matter how lonely. The world outside was vast and intimidating, but for the first time, it felt like it could also be mine. Starting over was terrifying. I remember the first night I rented a tiny studio apartment on the outskirts of the city, my backpack feeling heavier than ever, though it carried nothing but essentials. I had no safety net, no one to call for help, just the journal my grandmother had given me, and a stubborn refusal to give up. I found a job at a small boutique marketing firm, barely enough to cover rent, and every day felt like a test of endurance. I learned quickly how to read people, how to pitch ideas that sounded bigger than they were, how to stay calm when clients shouted and deadlines loomed. Nights were long, often stretching past midnight, with only the glow of my laptop and the hum of the streetlights outside for company. There were days I doubted myself, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd ever rise above the weight of my past. But each morning, I reminded myself of that journal, that voice telling me I was capable. It wasn't easy to find mentors who believed in me. Most saw a young woman with determination but little experience. But then I met Ms. Caldwell, a seasoned marketing executive, sharp-eyed and generous with guidance. She recognized the spark I was carrying and didn't hesitate to push me forward. "You're going to surprise yourself," she told me, handing me my first independent project. It was small, a local client, a modest campaign, but to me it was everything. I poured myself into work, into learning, into every late-night brainstorming pitches and tracking results. Slowly, success started to stack up, tiny wins that felt monumental. My first client who referred me to another, the first profitable project that landed me extra income, the first letter of praise from a CEO who appreciated my vision. Each step forward was a reminder that I didn't need anyone's approval to validate my existence. And I learned the power of discretion. I never posted pictures of expensive lunches or awards on social media. My parents didn't know. Even friends only glimpsed the surface. I wanted to keep my achievements close, a quiet affirmation that I could thrive without their recognition. My life was slowly filling with the things I had dreamed of: independence, stability, respect. I built a network of people who valued me, not my last name or where I came from. Every success felt like a secret victory, a private defiance against the memory of the night I left home. And somewhere deep inside, I began to realize that the world I was creating, rich in opportunities and accomplishments, was mine alone. They had written me off, but I was writing my own story now, and no one could take that away. I had been preparing for this moment for years, though I never imagined it would feel as surreal as it did. They didn't know I had relocated my life entirely. My parents still pictured me struggling in a tiny apartment, scraping by, barely able to make rent. So when they showed up at my doorstep, I let them walk into the version of me they would never expect. The moment they stepped inside my apartment, I held my breath. The space was a reflection of the life I had painstakingly built: polished hardwood floors, walls adorned with abstract art I had collected from local artists, sleek shelves lined with awards and books I had pored over late into countless nights. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with subtle hints of lavender from the candles I always burned while working. Every detail spoke of effort, independence, and quiet success. I watched them take it in. First, confusion. Then, disbelief. Their eyes flicked over my carefully arranged office corner, lingering on the plaque that proudly displayed my position as creative director of a rising marketing firm. Then, almost imperceptibly, they scanned my laptop sitting on the desk, the financial reports open, numbers that would make any adult pause. I let the silence stretch for a heartbeat too long, letting the tension grow. My parents' faces changed, pride battling shame, guilt wrestling with surprise. I could see it all. And then I spoke, calm but unwavering. "I'm not the girl you kicked out 16 years ago." I gestured around the apartment, a sweeping motion that encompassed everything I had built. "This," I said, my voice steady, "is the life I created on my own. Every client, every contract, every dollar came from me. No help, no shortcuts, no excuses." They blinked, mouths slightly open, as if trying to comprehend the transformation in front of them. Mom's hands trembled as she reached for the armrest of the couch. Dad's jaw tightened, a mixture of pride and regret flashing in his eyes. I watched them struggle to find words. And then, almost instinctively, I pulled out my grandmother's journal, the one I had carried the night I left home. I opened it, showing the scribbled pages filled with dreams, plans, failures, and victories. "This was my guide," I said softly, "and it reminded me of one thing: I am enough." I didn't need anyone else to tell me that. Not even you. The room was quiet again, heavier this time. Their gaze shifted from the journal to me, and I could see the reality settle in. They had underestimated me, dismissed me, and now they were forced to face the woman I had become. I didn't speak again immediately. I let the silence do its work, letting them absorb the full weight of my success. The life they thought they had written off was flourishing beyond their imagination. By the time I finally spoke, the power dynamic had shifted completely. I was no longer the child they could control or underestimate. I was the architect of my own destiny, and the truth of that reality had just landed firmly in their laps. The moment of truth had passed, but the air still hummed with tension. I could feel it. Finally, I had the upper hand. I wasn't here to punish them, but I also wasn't here to let history repeat itself. The years of being dismissed, ignored, and undervalued had taught me one thing: boundaries were power. "I'm willing to help. I said, my voice calm but firm. But only if things change. Their faces were still pale, eyes wide, unsure if they could meet my gaze. I held the journal close to my chest, a symbol of everything I had endured and overcome. This isn't about money or prestige, I continued. It's about respect, accountability, and growth. You can't just miss me and expect everything to go back to the way it was. That life is over. Mom swallowed hard, and I could see her trying to process the weight of my words. Dad shifted in his seat, tension coiling through his shoulders. I laid out the rules, deliberate and unwavering. First, honesty. No more lies, no more pretending that what happened never mattered. You need to acknowledge the past honestly. Second, self-growth. Find something meaningful to pursue. Whether it's work, education, or a passion you've ignored for years, I won't support a stagnant life built on excuses. Third, respect boundaries. You don't get to dictate my life or undermine my choices. I won't tolerate toxic behavior anymore. I paused, letting each condition sink in. Their reactions were subtle but revealing. Mom's fingers fidgeted nervously, Dad's jaw relaxed, finally showing a glimmer of acceptance. I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge. It was about creating space for healing, for rewriting our relationship on my terms. And one more thing, I added, my tone softening slightly. This isn't just about me. It's about you learning to live with integrity and dignity. You can't rely on guilt or nostalgia to reconnect with me. You have to earn it, just like I earned everything I have today. For the first time in years, I felt the power shift fully into my hands, not the controlling, vengeful power of anger, but the steady, self-assured power of someone who had survived and thrived against all odds. I could help them rebuild a relationship, yes, but only if they were willing to change and respect the woman I had become. As they sat quietly, absorbing the truth of my conditions, I realized something vital. This wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. The life I had fought to build was no longer negotiable, and my love, where it existed, would always be conditional on respect and growth. I had survived their rejection, and now I was finally in control of what came next for them and for me. The days that followed were quiet but transformative. I watched them slowly adjust, first in small, almost imperceptible ways. Mom taking a night class she had always talked about, Dad volunteering for a local community project he had dismissed before. They were learning to honor my boundaries, to respect my choices, and in the process, to respect themselves. I felt a strange sense of relief watching this transformation. It wasn't perfect, and it certainly wasn't without moments of frustration, but change was happening, and I no longer carried the weight of expectation or disappointment on my shoulders. I had given them the chance to grow, but I had also preserved the integrity of my own life. That, I realized, was the real triumph. Late one evening, I sat by the window in my apartment, the city lights shimmering below, and pulled out the journal my grandmother had given me, the same one I had carried when the world turned its back on me. I flipped through the worn pages, reading the words I had written in despair, hope, and determination. Every sentence reminded me of the journey I had taken, the obstacles I had overcome, and the woman I had become. I smiled softly, tracing the edges of the pages, feeling the texture beneath my fingers. The advice my grandmother had given me so many years ago had carried me through everything. Write your truth. Own your power. Never let anyone dim your light. I realized now that I had done exactly that. I had not only survived, but I had thrived. I had carved out a life filled with independence, dignity, and purpose. And in doing so, I had created a space where relationships could exist on honest, healthy terms. Looking out at the skyline, I felt a quiet pride, a blend of strength and grace that came from knowing I had faced my past and emerged unshaken. The life I had built was mine, the love I offered was earned, and the boundaries I set were unbreakable. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. And as I closed the journal and set it on the desk, I whispered to myself, almost as a vow, almost as a statement for the world. I am enough. I am unstoppable. And I am finally home, in my life, in my power, in myself. Bottom of form.